Is it the right time for you to be buying or selling a home? Don't go it alone. Trust the team at dangemus.com.
I just wanted to say kudos. I thought it. A lot of people are thinking it. You said it.
This is the Dan Gemus Real Estate Show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Yes, Dan Gemus with you here. Joyce Blackmere in studio with me today. We're having lots of fun and giving away prizes. You know,
it's always fun.
Always fun here. You can text in to win the contest today for the Richmond Popcorn Company gift card. The keyword is SALTY, SALTY, with your first and last name to 10800, and you're automatically entered to win. I can't speak. Entered to win. Okay, we're going to get to our legal segment today with Christian Janisse, lawyer with SimplyClose. Hey, Christian, how are you?
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Fantastic. What's happening in your world these days?
Well, it's much colder outside. I don't know where this came from. Not a big fan. Excited to be possibly going to Florida next month, and hopefully things start to heat up when I get back.
I was going to say we were in Florida a couple of weeks ago for a little stint, and it was cold. So hopefully it's warmer when you're there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, don't scare me like that.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to talk about today was the types of ownership. So in the past, we've talked about the difference between joint tenants and tenants in common, which are the two types of ownership when you're buying a house.
Yes.
So briefly, joint tenants, both parties or every party on title owns an equal share, and if one party passes away, the remaining owners automatically become the owners by right of survivorship. Whereas tenants in common, you have a percentage. So if you and I, Dan, buy a house, we can say, okay, Dan's 60%, Christian's 40%.
Sure.
What I wanted to talk about more today is that more and more you're seeing parents help co-sign mortgages, but you're also seeing people who will go into, like they might be spouses, they might be common law partners, they could just be friends, where they'll be tenants in common and they will have an unequal ownership of the property. So one of the things that people need to consider, whether it's a parent or a roommate who's buying a house together, is that regardless of your ownership as a tenant in common, you're responsible for 100% of the mortgage. So if you're a 1% owner, you're 100% responsible for the mortgage. So a lot of people don't know about that. They might think, oh, well, I only own 20%. I'm only on the hook for 20. The other owner will be on the hook for 80%. But that's not the case.
So it's very interesting. So how often are you seeing, this scenario play out? It's like, is it happening often, or are people for the most part just buying a house, with themselves or their spouse or their significant other, and that's the end of it? Are you often seeing unrelated parties buying? I shouldn't say unrelated, but I guess not what you'd expect. I guess in a traditional way.
I don't see many friends or like roommate type situations, but we definitely see. It's not the most common, but we do see where they might be like a younger couple, say like mid-20s or late 20s. They're not necessarily married yet, but they're in a relationship and they're renting and they don't want to rent, so they'll buy a house together and they'll split it. So sometimes it could be 50-50. It might not be an equal distribution. You don't see as low as 1% usually. But even as a parent, so if a parent's co-signing a mortgage and they only have 1%, just remember, you're only going to have 1% of the house. If something goes wrong, you're still on the hook for 100% of the mortgage. So we do see it quite a bit, actually, mostly with younger couples.
Yeah. Jeez,
so,
interesting.
And they don't think about that, right? Like they're just thinking like, oh, this person put so much amount of money, so they should be entitled to more, and that's what's fair. But on the flip side, if you break up or if one of you loses your job, and I don't know, things spiral out of control because things always go wrong in law. People think I'm crazy when I tell them, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? No, that'll never happen to me. And then,
what happened?
Right. Yep.
Oh, the craziest things can happen. I mean, you see it just from being in real estate yourselves that like things that you never thought would ever happen.
Wow. So over, it's been a few years since the start of COVID and prices really going crazy. Have you, in your practice, seen any, I guess, disappointing situations? Obviously you have, we've all seen it, but anything that really caught you off guard that you wouldn't think you'd see, but you've found along the way?
In terms of like types of ownership or just in general?
No, just in general.
What I've seen a lot more lately is not foreclosures, but powers of sale. So a lot of individuals bought houses during COVID or even just slightly after COVID where the prices are significantly higher. The rates are higher for these private mortgages, which we've discussed in the past. and the time has come where they have to renew, right? It might be 1 year, it might be 2 years, it might be 3 years later, and now they can't renew or they can't continue to afford the house at that price. Now, the issue with those mortgages are they're legitimate in some cases, but a lot of people get them when they shouldn't necessarily own a home. They're interest-only payments. And when you're paying interest-only payments, you've been paying the mortgage for a year or 2 years or 3 years. You haven't paid down any of the principal. So you bought it in 2021. You've been paying, whatever, $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month for the last 3 years, but none of that went to equity. And now the prices are lower than what they were. So when they go reappraise the mortgage, this is the issue that I'm seeing, is that when they go renew the mortgage, it's not being appraised at the value as it was when they originally got it. And because they have no actual equity in the home, if they bought the house for $350,000, got a private mortgage, paid interest-only payments, it's now only worth, say, $330,000 or $325,000, and they have no equity in the house other than the original down payment. So they can't get the same mortgage. It's terrible. I've actually seen probably 5 in the last 3 weeks of people who have to sell their house because they can't afford the mortgage.
Are they all private mortgages?
All privates.
Yeah, I was going to say, because a traditional mortgage, the bank will renew you no matter what. So what I'm being told by Ron.
And with the bank, right? you're paying into the equity too, right? So even though you've been making payments, it might not appraise as high as it did before. And I don't even know in terms of from the mortgage company side of things, like if they redo an appraisal when you're renewing. I don't think they do.
No, they don't.
Because as long as you're making your payments, they don't really care.
Yeah. It's tough because if someone typically has a private mortgage, there's typically a reason for it, right? There's usually a reason for it. So they won't be in the best financial, position in the first place, or there could be other reasons, but for the most part, they don't have the credit score or the income or whatnot that the bank
and sometimes
wants to
it's
see.
Investors
right.
will use it because they can't get any more money from the banks. There are legitimate reasons to use it, like even if you've fallen on hard times and you buy a house and you just need to build up your credit, you can use it properly. But the problem with COVID was that people weren't using it to build up their credit, or they were using it for investments for sure. There were a lot of people who bought houses thinking, well, you can't lose in real estate. And they're buying it and they're like, well, wait, I can't qualify at the bank. I'm going to use these private mortgages. That's the biggest issue I've seen over the last
house of cards.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we've been saying it for a long time. There's been a lot of, especially in the last couple of years, YouTube investors, I call them, right? Where they watch a couple of YouTube videos and they go out and they max everything out. They pull every penny from every, place they could possibly
and every
pull it
partner and every. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, there's an impotency, in the. And they can't. Well, it's a funny word to use, but you can't. Next thing you know, they can't pull any money out. There's just literally they've maxed everything out, and they're stuck. Right. The next thing you know, that like you said, the values go down, and they can't sell these things.
Yeah, and with the thing with even if you had a traditional bank mortgage, like what we see now is that now that you have to renew at a higher rate, like I'm just seeing people sell the houses. Yes. I've had a couple people who bought the houses a couple years ago. They're just trying to sell them because they're going to have to renew at a higher rate.
Right.
And at that rate, with where the rents are at, and then, there's all the rent control through the Residential Tenancies Act, they're losing money because they can't, by the time they pay the property taxes and everything else, it's not as, lucrative in terms of an investment. And as you know from owning other properties, like it's a lot of work. It's probably more work than people thought going in. It wasn't that much work when I had a client, one of the first clients I ever had, bought a house. She was going to move in there, and then she decided, no, I don't want to. And 3 weeks later, she sold it for $40,000 more. It just happened. This was actually pre-COVID. It was right before COVID. But that's what was happening in the market. Obviously, I don't think we're seeing that anymore. But I will say on a more positive note, I actually am starting to see a lot more activity. My January, February compared to last year is significantly busier. And a lot of people still have confidence in the market. And I say this to everybody. I still think Windsor, Essex is really cheap relative to other places.
Oh, it is.
It is.
Yes.
Yep,
which is sad to say, but that's reality. It's if you go up a couple hours up to 401, it's more expensive. Like prices are still going up. We are expecting prices to rise again this year. Mm-hmm. They're telling us about 7.5%. But you're absolutely right. We've been seeing it too. The market it's shaking again.
So much bubbling right now that it just takes one interest rate reduction, and
we're actually
everybody's going to go crazy.
We're actually a little worried about it, right?
Yeah.
The moment they make that one little quarter point reduction, we're afraid that it's going to spur the market again and get us into a bit more of a mess again. So we want to kind of, as realtors, we want to see an even market. We don't want to see a seller's market or a buyer's market. We like to be nice and even, where it's both parties are happy. But yeah, all we need is for the market to spur up again. Next thing you know, prices start going up again, and because of demand, right? So then we'll be enough on the market, and we get into some hot, hot seats all over again. So we're trying to avoid that, but the market.
Yeah, I don't want to see it. I want to see it grow naturally. I don't want to see it. It's fun when you do the COVID style of just that amount of activity, but at the same time, it's not sustainable, and then it just creates chaos. Even with people buying houses, something that I saw during COVID is that people would give these deposits, like $5,000, and that was their business plan. If they couldn't qualify for the mortgage, you'd lose the $5,000, because if you put an offer and you get the winning offer on whatever 10 houses, you might lose a couple deposits, but you flip the one within 2 weeks, you're making $70,000, and it was insane. It was just totally not sustainable.
Without giving names or without signifying where these cases come from, have you seen any issues where a homeowner had their house for sale and they had a certain price accepted and firmed up, and then that buyer didn't purchase the house, and lawsuits happening? Have you had any of those scenarios, and what's been the outcome?
We've had a lot, and so ours one settled. I have another one that's still ongoing, but just I'm part of a Facebook group of Ontario real estate lawyers, and probably once a week there's at least a new case that gets thrown on the board of somebody just saying oh, hey, look at this case, and the buyers are always losing. I haven't seen one where the buyers have won. People seem to think, there's some cases where they were the buyer never gave the deposit, therefore the contract's not valid. Not true. You don't need the deposit to have a binding contract. Once it's signed, it's binding. And if you don't fulfill your obligations as the buyer to complete the deal or submit the deposit, the seller can sue you for the difference. And there was a lot that are still coming out from when rates started to go up in 2022, and that's when everybody backed out. So I think over the next year or two, you'll see even more, because so many people backed out of deals because of the rising rates, or they couldn't qualify at the time.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Lots of, great info today, Christian. If anyone has any questions for you, how do they reach out to your team?
They can email us at hello@simplyclose.ca or give us a call at 519-997-3775. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. That's Christian Janisse with Simply Close. Interesting, isn't it, Joyce?
It is. Yeah. Always.
Yeah, we'll take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to give away the gift card for the Richmond Popcorn Company. Joyce, I'm going to give you the screen. You're going to be responsible for the winner today, so
all right.
Pressure's on.
All right.
You can still text to win. You can text the keyword SALTY, SALTY, with your first and last name to 10800, and we'll be back with more right here on the Dan Gemus Real Estate Show.